to resume the meeting. We now move to the amendment by the opposition group. Councillor Crisoli, please. Chris.
Thank you, Presiding Member. And it's been a long day, a long night, so I'll be very, very brief. Our amendment is actually because of the nature of what's happened with the budgets, both in Cardiff and London, and obviously from what the amendment the leaders put up, the figures in it are obviously going to be changed and it's going to be a less take from what we are proposing of the Strategic Economic Reserve. I think the issue we want to point out here is just the leader has pointed out how wonderful the budget is, and but we have to say all that glitters is not gold. But the one thing that worries quite a lot of members and a lot of people is the fact that we are borrowing money left, right, and centre, and every time you borrow money, you rob from your future, and I think people should start realising that. But the problem is we are now in a position where we have a fund which we have built up, and I'll give you an example of how we built that money up. In the years 2017, 2018, we put £3 million into the equalisation fund, but that same year we put savings into the budget of 19 million. The following year, 18-19, we put £12 million into that equalisation fund, but we had to have savings in the budget of 17. And then the following year again, 19-20, 2019, 2020, we put a further £10 million into that fund, and we were saving £12 million out of our revenue budget. So the reality is we put a huge amount of money into that fund. We have taken some money out of it to pay for some IT work, but at the end of the day, that is a huge sum of money that's been taken out of our revenue account. And we are saying, to be fair, we should actually now give the people of Swansea the opportunity to have a much lower council tax. And as I say, the figures that are in our amendment are now not accurate because of the change in which the majority group have just passed that amendment. There is, I think, an understanding, and I was listening to the shadowed finance spokesperson. I think her name is Eliza Dodds, is it? And she was saying that one of the problems is that council tax is now going to be used by various elected bodies as a stealth tax. We believe that that is the case, and we think that we as an authority should show the way and have that as a much lower figure than is currently being put forward. I think that the thing we need now to realise that this pandemic has set up a very unusual circumstances, not only with the budget, but with the council operation, as we said earlier on. But people's lives have been so badly affected. The fact that there's going to be quite a bit of unemployment. The furlough scheme has been in existence, which is not perfect, and has left people with in some very dire straits. We've seen a massive increase in food banks and a massive increase in various other organisations helping out. So what we are proposing is a reduction to council tax to 1.99%, and the other figures be altered accordingly. I therefore move the amendment.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Is it seconded, Councillor Mary Jones?
Thank you, Presiding Member. Yes, I mean, I listened quite intently to what the leader said, and I do believe they are going part of the way to reducing the burden. But I believe that the residents in Swansea have had a very difficult year, and some have had a devastating year. And while we have the opportunity, we should set the council tax as low as we possibly can without hurting services. Now, we've heard how the Labour group are going to do this, and our amendment is a small amendment. There again, when it's added up, it gives residents more money for themselves, and we have to be very aware that, you know, our residents just haven't got the money. We've had, you know, as you said, the hardship. Now, Councillor Holly just mentioned the Shadow Chancellor, Annalise Dodds, but she also said that one of the biggest threats to residents is the rise in council tax. So I'm not sure how you can square that. You know, we are trying to lower the council tax, and when you lower the council tax, the likelihood is that more people will be able to manage to pay their tax, so they're not going into arrears, and the council is actually getting the money that it needs to carry out these services. So although I think the Labour motion has gone, the Labour amendment has gone quite a long way to addressing some of these issues, I still feel you could have gone a little bit lower as per our amendment, and I second this amendment, and I hope that you will support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rob Stewart. Rob.
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of responding to that, I mean, I think we'd all share the intention, because I think both motions are trying to do the same thing, which is to assist taxpayers across Swansea in trying to balance the pressures with the need to obviously raise money for essential services. What I would say, though, is our motion was constructed on the basis that we were not raiding reserves, that we were not taking money out of the capital equalisation reserve, which members will know was set up entirely to ensure that we could cover the costs of repayment of all of the investment, both in schools estate and in the city centre, to ensure that there was no additional cost to the taxpayers of Swansea. Councillor Holly misrepresented really the position, because we haven't taken money out of services to create the capital equalisation reserve. I'm sure Mr Smith will be quite happy to confirm that the money that's been set aside has been raised in other ways, in terms of either benefits from reduced capital charges or surpluses, or other ways in which we've been able to acquire funding at outturn. The other thing I would say on this is that in our amendment, we have ensured that the money that's taken is sustainable, and that what we're doing has an effect, which doesn't mean that next year you have to raid reserves again in order to do that. So, you know, I know Councillor Jones and Councillor Holly have talked about Annalise Dodds and the comments there. Those comments I agree with, because councils in England are looking at 5% council tax rises to be able to stop themselves from going into bankruptcy. That's the position, the ludicrous position that Annalise Dodds and others have pointed out to, because they're getting so little support from the UK government over the border in England. It's not the same here in Wales, where we have support from the Welsh government. But also, I want to look at the real, the Chancellor who's in power at the moment, not the Shadow Chancellor, because what you will find with Rishi Sunak's budget is it does exactly what the Lib Dem amendment would seek to do here in Swansea, which is defer pain for a year, because it would be an artificial and temporary lowering of council tax, which would need then to have further raid of reserves next year in order to do something similar. What I said at the end of my presentation and when I concluded the motion was that this puts us in a position to be able to help again next year. And that is the difference between the motions, is that ours is funded without raising reserves, ours strikes the balance, and also it allows us to help further again next year. Now, again, just in closing, Chair, I would like to ask Mr Smith for his view on the motions, and specifically the sustainability point, because Mr Smith was very pointed in his comments previously about the use of reserves and the fact that we should retain them for the purposes they were raised. So I would welcome a bit of advice from Mr Smith on this point as well.
Thank you, Leader. Mr Smith, do you want to come in now on that?
I think it might be appropriate if I come in after the members have spoken on it. I'm more than happy to give officer advice, but I think it's appropriate that after other members have spoken, I will give my technical advice on the merits of this motion versus the other, if you don't mind, Chair.
Not at all. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ben. Okay, I've got no other group leader indicating. Councillor Clive Lloyd.
Yeah, very briefly, presiding member. I think the leader has answered the issue about Annalise Dodds at the Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer. I think she's talking about England. She's not talking about Wales in terms of council tax, where I've heard of council tax being proposed in 15% plus to try and make up some of the shortfalls as a result of the COVID crisis and the position that they were in before they went into this COVID crisis, which was the point I made earlier about good funding. Listen, at the end of the day, I agree with Councillor Hawley and many members, I suppose, in terms of this is a very unusual year, and it's right that we reduce the council tax burden on the people of Swansea, and I think that's what our amendment sought to do, quite rightly so, during this time. But we talk about ambition again and growth and future generations particularly. I think some of the points that Councillor Hawley made about the funding ambitions that we've got, we'd be doing a disservice to our future generations if we didn't do this. That's the fact of it. We have to grasp the mantle now. We have to have the most ambitious programme of investment, job creation there's ever been. If there's ever been a time for us to grasp the nettle and provide this capital investment, it's now. If we were going to do it before the COVID crisis, we certainly need to do it now. Ambition, the 1945 spirit, where we support the Swansea economy as much as we possibly can with the sorts of things that the leader has outlined in his earlier contributions on the revenue budget, is what we should be doing. And the rest will pay for itself as we increase the number of people that are living in Swansea, the number of people that are employed in Swansea, the number of people that can pay their role in paying council tax in Swansea going forward. Those are the sorts of things that we need to invest in now, because not doing it now will leave us and the future generations in a really precarious position, and something that I'm not prepared to do for my children and my grandchildren going forward. So I would vote against this motion and support a balanced motion, again, that we passed with the amendment that we supported just a few minutes ago, Presiding Member.
Thank you, Clive. Councillor Peter Black.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I start off first of all by welcoming the fact that the leader and the controlling Labour group have recognised the need to keep council tax as low as possible and have brought the amendment forward, which has just recently been voted on. I think it's important that in this year of all years that we do try to keep council tax as low as possible. I also welcome the huge amount of investment which is going into the Swansea economy. I think it's really important, as Clive Lloyd has just said, that investment is carried forward, and that we do start to try to create jobs and create economic activity in the city, which is going to help us come out of this pandemic and also survive the economic crisis, which I suspect Brexit is going to bring on us as well. However, the amendment which we're now debating will not diminish that support for the Swansea economy. It doesn't touch that investment. It doesn't touch the work which is going on to invest in Swansea. And the Capital Equalisation Fund, contrary, I think, to what the leader has said, does not cover the cost of that investment in entirety either. It merely delays repayments being borne by council taxpayers sometime in the future. And my view is that we are facing not just a rainy day, but a very severe rainy day, a typhoon, if you like, in terms of people's personal circumstances and in terms of what people can afford to do, given the huge hardships that everybody in Swansea has suffered over this last year. And I think it's up to this council to do our best to try to relieve that burden as much as possible. And if we do have that leeway, and I believe we do have the leeway, and the amendment shows we have the leeway, then we should reduce the council tax even further. And for that reason, I would ask you to vote for this amendment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Leslie Moulton.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I just want to say I totally agree with everything the leader and Councillor Lloyd have said. I just want to reinforce one point. I think it's very tempting to say, let's go as low as possible. But I think that is a little bit cynical. And what my concern is, if we go too low this year, how much more are we going to have to go up next year? And I think that will have a far worse impact on the residents of Swansea. Thank you.
Thank you, Lance. Okay, no other speakers. Councillor Chris Hawley to respond.
Thank you, Presiding Member, and can I thank the contributions from other people? But I think we need to remember that the capitalisation fund was taken out of our revenue account, and prior to 2017, that fund was much lower and used to be used in reserve in our revenue account as well. The thing is, we are in a very unusual year. People have been put through some of the most horrendous restrictions, the most horrendous quality of life ever, more than our generation has ever seen, and many other generations as well. And what we are asking is for a one-off small amount to bring council tax down lower, to show the people of Swansea that we have that compassion, that we have that willingness to take that. And if I understand what the Section 151 officer will come back and say, or think of the risks, yes, we are thinking of the risk. The risk is there are people around now who are suffering. And what we ask is, can we have that compassion and show that? As I have proven, and I've told you, we've put millions of pounds in that from revenue. We can share another, we can take out of there 1.2 million pound out of that, and to lower the council tax. I'm sure we can. And I just wish that people would understand that we want to help the people of Swansea as much as we possibly can. And I would hope that you can support this amendment.
Thank you, Chris. Mr. Ben Smith, then, Section 151 officer, before we go to the vote.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I'll tempt fate and put my camera back on and hope I don't lose connection.
Your
volume is going on.
Can you hear me, Presiding Member?
I can when your camera's off.
Yes, I've switched it back off. I knew I was tempting fate there. I refer to what I gave as the previous advice. The Chief Exec and I will be, our nervousness will increase the lower you go. It is a matter for you to weigh up what is right and proper for the medium term, the longer term, the well-being of future generations. I do get the intent of the amendment. I go to what Councillor Leslie Walton said in particular. This is a one-off amendment, and she is absolutely right. If you do a one-off amendment and take it out, it swings straight back in the following year, and that is the issue. It's a lawful amendment. In isolation, the budget balances, so in that sense, it's reasonable that it be debated. But it is the Chief Exec and my nervousness that you are deviating, if you were to pass this amendment, further from that long-term planning assumption, and it is a one-off draw from reserves. I've given my clear officer advice in the substantive reports that you should not draw from reserves, should not budget to draw from reserves. To answer the leader's further question in terms of clarifying the position, yes, there are substantial savings achieved as a result of a number of decisions that council, a majority of council, not unanimity of council, backed, which is that you agreed an MRP review. You understood that I was deferring the borrowing to as late as possible, and that there has been some capital slippage, and all of those have enabled money to be set aside in that reserve to smooth the glide path through to 25-26. It may now last a bit longer as a result of the UK government's announcement in terms of accelerating forward some of its city deal money, matching that the Welsh government has already accelerated forward some of its. So whilst it is tempting to draw from reserves one-off and recognising the compassion argument, and that it's been a dreadfully difficult year for everyone, I have to concur with the other comments made that whilst the motions look similar, the amended motions look similar, one is more sustainable than the other over the medium term. and I have to give advice on that basis. It's the issue that if you put it in one-off, the one-off drops out the following year and you are merely deferring the pain. I'll stop there because I'm worried about my connection, but I hope you've clearly heard the officer advice that I've given.
Yes, we did. Thank you, Ben. Okay, we're going to the vote. I'm sorry, members, you put your hands up after Councillor Holly has responded on the debate. We now go to the vote. Mr. Evans, please.
Okay, if I can just remind you all of what you're voting on. It's the Liberal Democrat Independent Opposition Amendment to the budget. It reads, it goes without saying that the global pandemic has had a huge financial impact on the lives of Swansea Council taxpayers. We call on the Labour Council to reduce the proposed council tax rise of 3.99% to a more affordable 1.99%. We propose funding the reduction with a one-off drawdown from the Capital Equalisation Reserve of 2.200 million to be shown as a contribution from earmarked reserves in the revenue budget of the same sum, and a consequential 0.44 million reduction to the budgeted anticipated costs of council tax reduction scheme as a result of that proposed overall lower council tax increase. We ask for the above amendment to the approved council report of the 18th of February 2021 be reflected in a final revenue budget to be agreed at council. Our proposed amendment would undoubtedly help the household budget of all Swansea citizens on the road to recovery from the pandemic. I am now going to put the vote up. It will be an electronic vote.
Excuse me, can I just point out, you've called a vote in circumstances where a number of people were unable to get their hands up to participate in the debate, and not all of us heard what Ben Smith was saying. I would like to ask a point of information, please, for clarification, so that I know exactly what the situation is that I'm voting on. Is it correct, and I think this is what Ben Smith was saying, that this proposal in this amendment cannot be considered as a one-off, but will have a rolling impact over the next 5 years? So instead of it being a 1 year 2 million, it becomes a 5 year 10 million? I would really like clarity before we proceed to the vote.
No, it's not that. No, it's not that simple.
Chair, if I may come in, presiding member, and I'll keep my camera off, I'll attempt to re-answer and give point of clarification, given that Councillor Rayner has raised that point. Can you hear me all?
Yes.
Yeah. The amendment motion as stated is only a one-off amendment, so it is not committing future budgets to further reductions. But the point I was making, Councillor Rayner, is that if millions are drawn out of an earmarked reserve and taken as a budgeted sum, as sure as the law of equilibrium requires, in the absence of anything else, it automatically goes back in the following year. So if you slice an extra 1 or 2% off council tax for next year, it doesn't commit you to the 2 million draws from reserves for 5 years, but it does mean that you load automatically whatever you save in this year's coming budget off the planning assumption onto next year's, and that may weigh heavily on your minds given particularly the timing of it. I will say no more than that. You've got to trade off what is, it's a well-intended amendment, as equally was your own group's amendment, but one is more sustainable than the other when viewed over the medium term, because as the leader has indicated, one draws from a base budget, one is a one-off draw from reserves, and once you start budgeting to draw from reserves, if you can't keep it up, it snaps back the following year. Some of you who know me could be much more florid in my language, but I won't, because I'm in public session. But I think you understand the effect of that. It's not to stop council considering in future years further draws from reserves, but it's a very slippery slope to plan to draw from reserves. Authorities that do that tend to find themselves in difficult situations. There is a distinction to be drawn between the two, between putting money into reserves at outturn because we've made savings on capital financing and capital charges, as opposed to planning to draw from reserves in the first instance. I hope that clarifies the point, Councillor Raine, and for other councillors, and my apologies that you didn't hear my full answer earlier.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Smith, and thank you, Presiding Officer, for acknowledging there are technical difficulties that we're all experiencing. Thank you.
Thank you. I can only go what's before me. People's hands are up or they're not up. And Chris Holly's was the only hand I had up, and he was responding to the amendment. So okay, it's been you understand what you're voting for. It's been properly put. We're now going to vote on it.
Yeah, so the vote's in front of you, as I outlined earlier with the amendment. And as always, I'll give it a minute and then I shall ask if anyone hasn't received it, and if you can raise your hands and I will come to you as we've done in the past.
Hands going up.
Yeah. Okay, I'll ask those who are unable to, didn't get the vote. Hazel Morris, how do you vote?
You're on mute, Hazel.
Against.
Irene Mann,
For.
Fiona Gordon,
That was on me.
Councillor Fiona Gordon,
Oh, against. Sorry.
was there any other councillor that didn't receive the electronic vote?
Yeah, Councillor Downing.
Councillor Downing. And how do you vote, Councillor Downing?
Against.
Any other councillors? No. I am closing the poll now then. And that vote is clearly against.
Okay, so the Labour amended resolution becomes a substantive motion. Okay, we now need to vote on that. Mr. Evans?
Yeah, if you give me a moment. If you recall, that's a named vote again as requested earlier. So you are voting on what is now the substantive motion. Okay, please say if you're for, against or abstaining. Councillor Cyril Anderson.
For.
Peter Black.
Abstain.
June Burdenshaw.
For.
Mark Child.
For.
Jan Curtis.
For.
Nick Davis.
For.
Mike Day.
Abstain.
Phil Downing.
For.
Ryland Doyle.
For.
Mike Dirk.
For.
Kerry Evans.
For.
Mandy Evans.
For.
Will Evans.
For.
Wendy Fitzgerald.
Abstain.
Robert Francis Davis.
For.
Steve Gallagher.
Abstain.
Louise Gibbard.
For.
Fiona Gordon.
For.
Kevin Griffiths.
Abstain.
Joe Hale. David Hellwell.
Abstain.
Terry Hennigan, Chris Holly,
Abstain.
Paxton
sorry.
Williams,
Abstain.
Beverly Hopkins,
For.
David Hopkins,
For.
Oliver James,
For.
Linda James,
Abstain.
Yvonne Jardine,
For.
Jeff Jones,
Abstain.
Lyndon Jones,
Abstain.
Mary Jones,
Abstain.
Peter Jones, Sue Jones,
Abstain.
Elliot King, Erica Kirshner,
For.
Miles Langston, Miles Langston, Andrea Lewis,
For.
Mike Lewis,
For.
Richard Lewis,
Maybe I could try and talk to her.
Yeah, you two seem friendly.
What do you mean by that?
Wendy Lewis,
For.
Clive Lloyd,
Yeah, 4, but I'm absolutely amazed that everyone's abstaining after they lost their blinking amendment.
Paul Lloyd,
Believe this. You
Oh.
don't seriously think I did this.
You know, if you can't admit it,
Irene
no
Moss,
choice.
Really. So what are you going to do?
For.
I can't
Ellie
do it.
Matthews,
For.
You know, you can do that.
Peter May,
Because once Kim what she's done, she'll be in
Oh.
full agreement. Pack your things.
Hazel Morris,
Get out.
For.
David Phillips,
For.
Cheryl Philpott,
Abstain.
Sam Pritchard,
For.
Alison Pugh,
For.
Jen Rayner,
For.
Christine Richards,
For.
Ellie Roberts,
For.
Bridget Rowlands,
Abstain.
Mary Sherwood,
For.
Paulette Smith, Robert Smith,
For.
Andrew Stevens,
For.
Rob Stewart,
For.
Gareth Sullivan,
Abstain.
Mo Sykes,
For.
Gloria Tanner, Des Thomas,
For.
Graham Thomas,
Abstain.
Mark Thomas,
For.
Will Thomas, Linda Taylor Lloyd,
Abstain.
Gordon Walker, Leslie Walton,
For.
Mike White,
For.
43 for, 18 abstentions with nobody voting against. So the motion as amended is carried. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That takes us to item 10, the capital budget and programme 2020 to 2021 to 2026-27. Mr. Ben Smith, please.
Thank you, presiding member. Again, I'm going to leave my camera off to avoid tempting fate. You'll be pleased to know this will be where I start to speed up and don't take the full allotted 15 minutes for officer technical advice on each report, given the elapsed time. The capital budget before you, I briefly draw your attention to matters pertinent. It accords entirely with the assumptions set out in the medium-term financial plan and the revenue budget, and in particular provides for an additional capital contingency of £20 million. Section 2.1 sets out that the outturn forecast will be over £200 million for the current year. That is pretty remarkable given the turmoil we've had that we've continued to spend throughout, and that will be the largest ever outturn. Section 2.3 sets out the 6-year programme and accords with the leader's slides earlier, which indicated it's a £500 million capital programme. with significant but planned funded revenue programmes of support. Section 2.4 reminds that the school's Band B is approximately £150 million on top of Band A. Section 2.5 summarises the city deal. At the point in time, which is what we knew, there have been a flurry of announcements, as I've already referred to elsewhere on this agenda, around the city deal, which is likely to bring the cash flow forward, which helped some of the earlier deliberations on the revenue budget. Section 2.6 sets out how it is financed, references the borrowing strategy, my continued clear officer advice on when it is appropriate and not appropriate to use the capital equalisation reserve. That is all I need to say in terms of technical advice, but I'm happy to take questions, Presiding Member.
Thank you, Ben. Are there any technical questions? I can see no hands. I assume everyone who wishes to ask a question has got the opportunity to. No? If not, on to the leader, please, Rob.
Thank you, Chair. I won't prolong things. Happily formally move the report and just commend the delivery of our capital programme, which remains the biggest we've ever delivered, and the delivery especially during COVID. So, Chair, happy to formally move.
Thank you. It's been moved. It's been seconded.
Happy to formally second.
Thank you. Anyone wishes, other group leaders? No, no one's indicating. No. Call Hugh to go to the vote then, please.
Right, I've just launched the vote. It's in front of you. Again, if you don't receive it, if you could raise your hands and I'll come to you in a couple of seconds. Okay, I'll come to those who haven't received the electronic poll. Wendy Lewis.
I did, Hugh, but it didn't seem to submit, so I don't know whether I have.
So yeah, say how you want to vote, and I'll make sure it's not done twice.
Okay. Oh.
Fiona Gordon.
4.
Any other? Oh, sorry, Hazel Morris.
4.
Any other? David Helliwell. Councillor Helliwell. Councillor Helliwell.
4.
Councillor Eileen Mann.
4.
Thank you. Okay, there's nobody else indicating that they haven't received the poll, so I'm going to close the vote now. And again, that's a clear vote in favour of the recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Item 11 is next on our agenda. It's the HRA revenue budget. Again, Mr. Smith, please.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I again will be brief on this item before I hand over to the relevant Cabinet Member. Section 2 of the report sets out that there is likely to be an underspending year and that we continue to monitor the rent situation closely. Section 3 of the report sets out the rent strategy which underpins the HRA revenue account. Section 4 sets out the budget in terms of income from rents and also significant contributions by way of revenue contribution to capital outlay. Section 4.1.6 makes clear there is a major surplus on the HRA revenue account, which in line with previous year's strategies is available to fund the very substantial HRA capital programme, which will be the next item you consider in due course. Section 5 sets out the risks that the HRA faces. Section 6 sets out my formal certification on reserves, and I am advising you that I consider that the risks and the opportunities mean that those reserves are adequate, and that is all I need to give by way of technical officer advice before I hand over to the relevant cabinet member.
Are there any technical questions? No, no one indicating. Leader first, then the cabinet member.
Chair, I'll just formally move. I understand Councillor Lewis will make a few comments in seconding the report.
Thank you, Councillor Andrew Lewis.
Thank you, Presiding Member. In the interest of time, I will try and be brief. I do need to highlight Section 3 in particular. Members will remember back in December 2019, the Minister for Housing and Local Government set out her policy for a 5-year period from April 2020. The new policy set a maximum annual increase in rental income of CPI plus 1%. This is what we have adhered to as an authority again this year. Just to remind members, this is predicated on and intrinsical to our business plan in terms of building new homes and delivering Welsh Housing Quality Standard. Swansea is still very favourable in terms of rent, ranking 26th out of 49. The average private sector rent in Swansea is £136.54, and I'm pleased to say that we are an average of 99.64 based over a 50-week period, so we're very reasonable. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank housing staff working through very difficult times, still managing to support our tenants. I won't say anything more than that, but my gratitude goes out to all of them. You'll see the summary at Appendix A, and I second the recommendations on page 122, Presiding Member.
Thank you, Andrea. Are there any questions? Any group leaders first? No. Wendy Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a very brief question. Paragraph 2 of the report, it does say that the revenues repair budget is forecast to be significantly underspent by £1 million, and this was due to COVID and people not being able to go into residents' houses to do the repairs. Is there going to be an effort to try and recover the situation in terms of repairs? I'm sure there is going to be this kind of effort, but could the cabinet member just let us know the latest situation?
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Thank you to Councillor Fitzgerald for the question. This is linked to the capital spend. This is obviously linked to borrowing in the revenue respect. Yes, we altered our priorities this year. So we realised that we couldn't get in to do repairs and maintenance. We focused very much on dealing with bringing voids back into use, and also shifted some of the spend and brought some of our new home developments forward into this financial year because we could deliver those in a safe way. So we have made some amendments and some adjustments. And we will transfer the spend to next year, and you will see in the second report to do with HRA capital that our investment has never been bigger, and I look forward to introducing that report with more detail for Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you for that. No other speakers, questions? Sir Evans, the vote, please.
Okay, I've launched the vote. Hopefully it'll be in front of you. Again, same principle. I'll give it a moment before. If you don't receive it, please raise your hands and I'll come to you. That's great. Okay, who have I got? Councillor Fiona Gordon.
4.
David Helliwell.
Abstain.
Councillor Hazel Morris.
4.
Anybody else that didn't receive the electronic vote? No? Okay, I'm closing the poll there.
Sorry, Hugh. On the previous vote, I've noticed my name, Peter May, didn't come up. I'd like to register as 4 under item 10, please. Sorry.
No, item 10 has closed, I'm sorry, and that vote was was 4. I
did press 4 and everything like that. There must have been electronic failure, but register it as 4 if it's possible, please.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not possible. Apologies for that. And back to item 11. Again, that's a clear vote for.
Okay, thank you. Item 12 is the HRA Capital Budget and Programme 2020-2021 to 2024-25. Again, Section 151 Officer Ben Smith, please.
I will be even briefer on this one because I've got technical difficulties on the other laptop now, but the important bits for me to give officer advice are that this is a major capital programme, predominantly driven by the Welsh Housing Quality Standards and the More Homes strategy. It's a £250 million plus capital programme, and the report sets out how it is financed, predominantly from substantial HRA revenue surpluses. It's entirely in line with previous years, and I'm more than happy to take technical questions before otherwise handing over to the relevant Cabinet member. Thank you, Presiding Member.
Okay, thank you. Are there any technical questions for Ben? No one indicating. On to the leader then, please.
Again, Chair, formally move and hand over to Councillor Lewis to say a few words as she seconds.
Thank you. Is that seconded?
Thank you, Presiding Member. I'm happy to second the report and just to comment again very briefly. 2.2 and 2.3 refer to the slippage that Councillor Fitzgerald mentioned in the previous report, and 2.3 shows that we brought schemes forward into this year. Just to highlight that 2.3, the revised programme for More Homes, but just particularly to note the additional phase 2 funding that I referred to at Council on Tuesday. My gratitude to Welsh Government giving us over £5 million, not only to provide additional wraparound support to tackle homelessness, but also to deliver more affordable units, much needed for single people particularly. 3.2 shows that we have been given a 12-month extension to deliver Welsh Housing Quality Standard by the Minister and by Welsh Government. So the deadline for the standard now reads as December 2021. This is due to the delays that Councillor Fitzgerald referred to in terms of COVID. 4.3, just to highlight to members, the compliance for the majority of WHQS components are extremely high, as you will see in the table there. More Homes strategy is extremely ambitious. We've got an indicative expenditure of £56.2 million towards just new homes over the next 4 years. And the table at Appendix A shows that in its entirety over the next 4 years, we'll be investing £233 million in raising the standard for our council tenants in existing properties and also delivering new homes. But I'd like to refer, Presiding Member, to a question that I particularly received recently from a Castle Ward resident, Hannah Lawson, asking what investment was to be expected at the top of High Street. And so I will specifically mention we are investing over £18 million at the top of High Street. That's to refurbish the high rise at Croft Street and also the surrounding homes. And we will be relocating the district housing office to the 2 retail units fronting High Street. So an incredible amount of investment there. And I will be writing out to the resident with a formal response to her question. Happy to take any questions, Presiding Member.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Andrew? No one indicating. Okay, do the vote, please, Mr. Evans.
Okay, again, I've launched the vote. Hopefully it'll be with you. Again, if you haven't received, if you can raise your hands and I'll come to you. Hazel Morris, how do you vote?
For.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Bridget Rowlands.
For, please, Hugh.
Councillor David Helliwell. Councillor David Helliwell.
For, please, Hugh.
Thanks. Councillor Irene Mann. Councillor Mann.
I've managed to make an electronic vote though. For.
Okay. And Councillor Fiona Gordon.
For.
Thank you. Anybody else needing to register a vote? No? Okay, I shall close that poll then. And again, I can say that.
Oh, sorry, love.
I can see that vote is unanimous.
Okay, thank you. Item 13. Item 13, the statutory resolution. Resolutions to be made in accordance with the regulations in the settlement of the council tax 2021-22. Okay, section 151 officer, Mr. Smith, please.
Thank you, presiding member. I'm going to speak a little bit to this resolution. I am also going to have to try and share my screen, which may tempt fate on this one, given I've got video issues, but I am going to endeavour to do so. But I'm going to speak first to it. It is important that you pass the statutory resolution in a correctly worded format. As council is aware, they amended and then passed the replacement substantive motion, which substituted a council tax increase of the 2.99%. I have been working on my two laptops to try and reflect all of those in the statutory resolution. And as I say, I'm going to pause now and attempt to share my screen. If it fails, I'm going to switch the screen off and read out some of the important numbers. I will have a version that I'm able to circulate to Mr. Evans, and I will circulate it to members as soon as I possibly can. I hope members realise the sheer complexity of the statutory resolution. It's got to apply and work to the millions, to the thousands and the penny across every single band and for every parish council. So I'm going to endeavour to share screen, and if I fall over, apologies. Please do let me know if you can see.
That's good.
So I'm just going to check I've got the right version on screen, because I've run with every version imaginable on the basis of the resolutions that you've passed. So this is the replacement statutory resolution. The statutory resolution, and what I've done is I've highlighted in red anything that changes. So by way of technical advice, be aware that the tax base doesn't change. The tax base for the individual community councils doesn't change. As a result of you passing the revised substantive motion, the first figure that changes is Stat Resolution 3A as displayed on screen, because that has reduced the amount of revenue budget expense. It's that capital financing and CTRS costs that have been reduced. It doesn't change 3B because there's been no change to the income assumptions. 3C is 3A minus 3B. So if I change 3A, I have to change 3C. Because the final settlement that we received from the Welsh Government resulted in no change from provisional settlement, 3D holds. As a result of the changes at 3A and 3C, it washes through the technical calculation as to how I get to 3E, which is now a replacement standardised amount of £1,465.80 as shown on screen. I then am required to deduct the special items, which are the Community Council precepts, which gets me to 3G, which is the substantive council tax at band D, excluding the community councils, i.e. the City and County of Swansea's element of 1448.35. There are then consequential amendments to all of the individual bits, which I haven't highlighted because I'm sure you do not want to read all 50, 60, 70, 80 permutations of that. I will make a copy available as soon as practicable, given I've got some IT issues, but the important bit is that you're giving effect to all of those that you'll be voting on in due course, and in particular that 3G item, which is 1448.35. I am going to tempt fate further and try and share one other item with you, if I may. So I'm going to take that sharing option off, and then I'm going to attempt to share, I believe it's this one, which it is. So just, even though I couldn't show it earlier, my apologies. Now this is only changing the numbers, and this is to advise you and to make clear that this is what you passed as a result of the substantive moving of item 9. You reduced the count, and this is a working document. It's not a cabinet or council report, I hasten to add. It is my working spreadsheet. So you reduced the expensed amount of council tax reduction scheme by the amount that the leader's amendment referenced, and again reduce those principal repayments by the figure referenced by the leader in the amendment, and you will see that that has the effect of freezing the principal repayments for the year. That reduces a number of other items which I haven't highlighted in terms of the additions, but they all flow through. And the important thing is that you will note that it comes to the same £1,448.35p, being the 2.99% increase at band D, which gives effect to all of those revised calculations in the statutory resolution. Now, I apologise, that is incredibly technically complex. In a normal year, you do not have any of these items in front of you in terms of the working spreadsheets, but in what has been this most unusual of years, you've ended up with multiple resolutions in front of you. I thought it important that you at least have sight of the one that you were giving effect to. It is vitally important that the minutes reflect exactly what I have displayed on screen, and they will do so in due course. But I hope you do appreciate I've had to do that at pace. I did have versions for all of the resolution and amendment options in front of you, and that's the only reason why I'd like to look at it again in the cold hard light of day on all of the ripple through items in the complex tables. But it most definitively shows that the resolutions passed on the substantive item 9 are reflected in then that statutory resolution. I will pause there because I do appreciate that is an incredibly technical and complex statement to make, but I thought it important for the avoidance of doubt that you know what you are being asked to ask questions of me on and what to vote, and more importantly, and most importantly, what Mr. Evans records as the statutory resolution, because it is that gives effect to my ability to collect council tax on your behalf. I will pause then there, presiding member, and my thanks to members for listening to that complex bit of machinery.
Thank you, Ben. That was superb. I'm sure we all understand every word you've said. Councillor Peter Black.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Is it possible that Ben could share the final table from point 5 of the report so we can see the final figures for council tax?
Sorry, I'm on mute. I will endeavour to do so. Table, let me call it up again. The stat resolution, you wanted table 5. Can you see that all? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but I can't see it.
Which
I can see it.
It's the very last table in the report.
Can you see it and hear it?
Is that the one there? That's it there, is it?
Is that the table, Peter?
Yeah, so the band D is 1738.07, is that correct?
Band D 173. I'm displaying table 5, which includes the
includes the police precept, yeah.
Yeah.
So the
point of order, presiding member, it's not a personal interest, is it? He's not checking his own.
No, I'm band B. I'm just trying to work. I just want to know what the band D council tax we're voting on. So I can't quite make out the figures. Is that 1738.07, Ben, at the bottom?
Sorry, again, can you, if you can see the screen, the bit that you are voting on in terms
It's
of
that
your
one, I understand
statutory
that, yeah.
resolution, it's only the band D for Swansea, which is that one in terms of 1448.35, which I referenced at the very beginning of the report and also showed you in the now substantive report number 9. The rest of the report adds in the components for the police authority precept and the community councils. So the relevant one that you are, I mean, effectively you're giving effect to all of them because you are collecting it on behalf of the police.
I understand. I'm just trying to ascertain the band D at the bottom. Is that 1738.07?
I make that 1736.07 on my
1736.
screen. And,
Okay, thank
and
you.
apologies, it's just the size of screens that
I
were
know,
wrong.
that's right. That's great. Thanks for that.
My apologies for labouring the point, but it's I understand why you've asked it, Councillor. But I hope that clarifies. Are you okay if I unshare the screen again now?
I'm fine with that. Yeah, thanks.
I would treat silence as opportunity to unshare the screen, and I'm very pleased to be able to that the video held up well enough on that point. So as I say, I think the Councillor Black's intervention has made clear that you are voting on, you know now what you are voting on as a technical matter. I do appreciate it is very complex. I don't think we've ever tried to do 3 on the night. What's been the weirdest year and the weirdest week of having 3 budgets in a row. And I go back to what I said at the beginning, we're effectively not just turning up with options, we are also asking you to vote on it today and pass it, which is slightly different to what happens at the 2 national government levels. So again, I will pause there and conclude my technical advice and hand over to appropriate members to seek to pass the resolution.
Thank you, Ben. There are no other indications of technical questions. Can we go to the leader then, Councillor Stewart?
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, quickly, we'll formally move the report and thank Mr. Smith for his speedy wizardry of the numbers. I think he's in full Hogwarts mood tonight, but an excellent job to get those numbers ready so quickly.
Thank you, Leader. Is that seconded?
Happy to formally second, presiding member.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Chair, will you run the vote, please?
So just remember, this is as amended, what you're voting on now. Sorry for this. There you are. It should be a view now. Okay, I'll just see who hasn't had it. Councillor David Helliwell, how do you vote?
For you.
For, thank you. Councillor Hazel Morris.
For.
Anybody else? Oh, Councillor Fiona Gordon.
For.
Any other councillors not receiving it and wishing to vote verbally? No. Okay, I shall close the poll. If I can make it work. I'm just closing the poll and we can. Yeah, that's a clear vote in support.
Okay, thank you. Okay, item 14 then, the Capital Strategy 2021 to 2026-27. Again, Section 151 Officer, Ben Smith, please.
Thank you, presiding member. Again, I will be brief on this one. This is a requirement for you to adopt a capital strategy. You've had a whole raft of reports from me tonight, which have got lots of numbers in. This is the corresponding one that has lots of words in. Given the lateness of the hour and even my joy and excitement over a budget runs out eventually, I do not propose to give any other technical advice at this point, unless there is anything so riveting in the report that any member wishes to ask me questions on there. But I'm hastened to add, I might need to go and get myself another triple espresso caffeine shot, because even I'm beginning to to go a bit square-eyed on it, but I will. So I've got nothing else to add. So I'm happy to take technical questions if there are any from members, presiding member.
Are there any questions? No. Leader?
Chair, formally move.
Formally move. Is it seconded?
Formally second.
Thank you. The vote, please, Mr. Evans.
Yeah, passes winging his way to everybody. Okay. Okay, those unable who haven't received it, Councillor Hazel Morris.
4.
Councillor David Halliwell.
4.
Councillor Fiona Gordon.
4.
Anybody else wishing to vote verbally? No.
Yeah, it's Oliver 4.
Any others? No.
Curtis.
Who was that, sorry? I can't hear who that is.
Jan
Curtis.
Sorry, one at a time. Who was that?
Jan Curtis.
Jan Curtis. How are you voting, Jan? Did anybody pick that up? Jan, we missed how you were voting.
4. He said 4.
4. Thank you.
Said 4.
Okay, we'll close the poll on that. And again, I can say that's clearly 4.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Evans. Item 15 is the Treasury Management Strategy Statement, Prudential Stroke Treasury Indicators, Investment Strategy and Minimum Revenue Provision Policy Statement for 2021-22. Again, Section 151, Officer Ben Smith, please.
Thank you, presiding member. You now come on to my favourite report of the night. It's the one that I like the most. I saved the best to last. It's got the most complex combination of words and numbers in, and it's one that I will reserve the right to speak for the whole 15 minutes on because I find it really, really interesting. And I know that several members normally like to ask me lots of questions on it. I'm more than happy to take questions on it. But I don't want to stifle debate, but equally I don't want to overly prolong the debate. All joking aside, I'm going to be brief given that the lateness of the hour. But actually, although it's a boring technical document, it's vitally important. It's what sets out the MRP strategy, which has created the vast majority of the money that's been put into the capital equalisation reserve. It sets out the borrowing strategy. It sets out how I've complied throughout the year. Because, as you know, all financial transactions are delegated to me to act on your behalf and execute on your behalf with Treasury counterparts. And it's the sort of stuff that has got other authorities elsewhere in dreadful difficulty. SIPFA, my professional institute, has cracked down and is introducing a new prudential code because they were concerned that some authorities had got themselves into a little bit of a pickle. And that includes ones that the leader referenced earlier that have got themselves now into such grave difficulty that they require bailouts or hoped for bailouts from the UK government. So I don't wish to downplay the importance of what is a very, very dry document. It is, as I say, very, very important, and it's important that I account for my actions throughout the year. I think it clearly sets out the long-term borrowing strategy. It sets out the likely costs which are going to increase, but it's entirely consistent with what was in the revenue budget and the medium-term financial plan. So I will pause there, presiding member, to take attempt to answer any technical questions that may be raised of me, but it is a very important document. It's one that's got an awful lot of authorities into grave difficulty because they haven't followed the CIPFA code, or they've been a bit esoteric and a bit clever with some of their capital financing strategies. And I will emphasize what advice I gave to scrutiny, which is I am a very, very boring treasurer when it comes to this. I do plain vanilla, and I go long and I borrow from the PWLB at some of the record lowest rates known in living history. So I will absolutely pause there, having stretched the technical advice a little bit further. Thank you, presiding member.
Thank you, Ben. You're never boring. Are there any technical questions? Councillor Clyde-Lloyd.
Yeah, thank you, presiding member. It's not a technical question. It's a comment, really. I suppose it's it's one of those things that I want to speak specifically around the MRP, because it's something that Mr. Smith has referred to, and it's something that we've myself and the leader considered many years ago. I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago, or whether we should do minimum revenue provision, and it's something we didn't take lightly. But I think it's been the right thing to do. It's spread out some of the debt that that the council has endured, and I think it's been the right thing to do in the right time frame. So I think the report reflects that, really. I think it was a good decision at the time, and I think taking everything into account, I think that Mr. Smith is right. It's the right thing to do.
Thank you, Clive. No one else indicating with any questions? The leader?
Formally moved, Chair.
Is there seconded? Somebody second, please.
Formally
I'll second it if
seconded.
nobody else will.
Formally seconded.
Hugh, take the vote, please.
Okay, the vote has been launched. It should be winging its way towards you. Same principle as always. Brilliant. Okay, I'll take the verbal votes now. Councillor Hazel Morris.
For.
Councillor David Halliwell.
For.
Councillor Fiona Gordon.
For.
Any other councillors wishing to vote verbally?
Can I just check? Did my vote register, Hugh?
I can't see, so you best to give it now until next.
Four, please, Hugh.
Okay, no problem. Anybody else? No? Okay, I shall close the poll. And that is carried.
Thank you. Okay, I think that concludes the voting procedure for tonight. I think the electronic voting, whilst it's a bit laborious, it's still a lot quicker than the other method we used by going through the roll call. But so good. Thank you, Ben, for your input to all the reports you've given us tonight. And as I said before, you're never boring. You try to make it as clear as possible for lay people who we are after all.
Thank you, presiding member, and my apologies for the few technical difficulties, but I think most of it we got across in terms of being clear as to what advice was being given, and I think you voted accordingly, well informed, and I thank you for your thanks, presiding member. And I've tried to lighten the tone a little bit because they are long and dry subjects, so your thanks is much appreciated, and all members' forbearances. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, agenda item 16, which is councillors' questions. It is now 20:54. Okay, and we've got 30 minutes for councillors' questions. Question 1, Councillor Linda Tyler-Lloyd, any supplementaries? Linda, you there? No. Will Thomas isn't with us either. Okay, we move on then. Question 2, Councillor Mike Day.
Thank you, Presiding Member.
Oh. Sorry, is that Linda?
Yeah, that's me. Sorry, this was difficult. No supplementaries, but there's a problem on the road which I will be writing to, not tonight, but I will be writing about it to Councillor Mark Thomas tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, question 2, Councillor Mike Day.
Yeah, thank you, Presiding Member, and thank you, Cabinet Member, for the response. At the Scrutiny Programme Committee meeting on the 16th of February, where they were looking at the consultation arrangements in connection with the active travel schemes, I mentioned the fact that a number of residents had had a letter from the Welsh Government indicating that they'd drawn the attention of the council to what they saw as need for improvement in consultation and communication arrangements. The Cabinet Member and officers were unaware of the communication. I forwarded the wording to them, and I just wondered if the Cabinet Member had had an opportunity of exploring that, because there seemed to have been some difference of opinion as to who might have said what to whom.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If I can respond. Yes, it was raised at scrutiny, and I've had some correspondence over it. And thank you for sending a copy of the letter or email that was sent to a resident from one of the officers in Welsh Government. As I said at scrutiny meeting, we, and that is still the case today, have had nothing in writing or verbally from any person involved with Welsh Government, officer or minister, in regard to the way we've carried out our consultation throughout all of our active travel schemes. I am aware of that email that you sent me, and I have forwarded that to officers to clarify, and I can inform you, as the position is today, Head of Service Stewart Davis is taking that matter up with the director of that relevant department to seek clarification on that, because on one hand it appears that an officer of the Welsh Government has written to a resident saying they've spoken to us, and I can absolutely categorically tell you that we have not been spoken to. That was the case previously when I was asked a question in scrutiny. It's still the case today. I can't explain why an officer of Welsh Government would say that, but I can tell you that we have received nothing. In fact, we've had meetings in December and January with officers of Welsh Government, as is normal, and it's never been raised. Never been raised. So I don't know what the background to this is and what's behind it. As I've said repeatedly at last council, during scrutiny, and today I will repeat it, we have carried out all the necessary consultation that we've been required to under guidance and legislation laid down by Welsh Government. The proof of the pudding is, had we not done that, then we would not be continuing to get the highest settlement of funding from Welsh Government. If you think about it, apply a bit of common sense here. If we were out of order, then Welsh Government in the first place would not award us funding, and secondly, they'd be looking to withdraw it. So we are not guilty of not, carrying out the consultation as laid down by Welsh Government. I have said this so many times. I don't know how many more times I need to say it to councillors and members of the public to clarify the position, but we have carried out all the consultation that is required of us by legislation and by guidance.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Christine Richards. Can we not repeat questions that's been already asked in scrutiny and public? Okay. Christine?
I'm not sure whether this has been asked before, Chair, but certainly I haven't been in any meetings where it has. I'd like to ask the Cabinet Member, actually, if you can outline the communications with local members to advise them of the schemes, and whether you had any responses from those members, please.
Yeah, well, I can inform Councillor Richards, yes, that has been asked, actually. It was asked at scrutiny. Prior to the scrutiny meeting, we supplied the chair of scrutiny and all the attendees with a list of emails and letters of our communication process with ward councillors and with residents. In respect of Councillor Day's ward, I did send out letters on the 27th of August, I believe it was, to all ward councillors.
28th.
And I received no responses other than Peter Jones did send a query saying that he would like to have further information. But from the other councillors, I had nothing. And that's really what's happened here, is that although we have informed ward councillors, they didn't take up that opportunity to discuss or query the arrangements that were going to be in their wards. And then when it came about and residents found out, the residents asked councillors, well, why didn't you tell us about it? And they were found wanting because they didn't inquire about it. I mean, it's quite rich.
That's incorrect.
It's quite rich. It's quite rich that councillors will. Chair, if I can finish, please. It's quite rich that councillors will challenge me and officers and this authority on what they perceive as a lack of consultation. But consultation is a two-way process. I can write to ward councillors and invite them to take part and invite them to ask questions about pending projects and schemes in their wards, but I can't make them do that. If they choose then not to, take up that invite, I can't go knocking their doors. I haven't got the time, and officers haven't got the time to go knocking their doors. The invitation was made, it was not picked up on, and then it was subsequently, several months later, when ward councillors actively got involved in these projects.
That's incorrect, but this is probably not the place to debate that, but I dispute that.
Well,
Finished, Mark.
Yes, I've made my statement, Chair, thank you.
Councillor Jeff Jones.
Yes, it is incorrect. I did contact officers, and I've had an email from the Cabinet Office when I actually asked for more information, and they said that the Cabinet member would contact me on the 3rd of October, and there was another email that actually came out with a couple of plans, so you're incorrect.
From what I can understand, Councillor Jones, I think your scheme, or was it Councillor Mary Jones's scheme, was an add-on. I sent the letter I'm referring to, I sent on the 27th of August, not the 3rd of October.
No, to clarify, the email actually came out containing the letter. It was dated the 28th of October, 28th of September, but was actually sent out on the 28th of October. I clarified that with officers. For me to contact you or the officers and to have, which I've got an email from the Cabinet Office saying that the Cabinet member would contact me.
Can I raise a point of order?
Oh, gosh, do you?
Don't interrupt, please. The member is speaking.
I'm raising a point of order, Chairman.
Sorry, what's the point of order?
This is, as I understand it, members' questions to the Cabinet member. It's not a dialogue about whether a letter was dated on a particular date or not. He's asked a question, he's had an answer. This is not a debate, it's a question and answer session.
David is asking the question and Mark Thomas is giving the answer.
If I can clarify the position, Chair, I wrote to all councillors who had schemes being developed and built in their wards this year that was approved at the Cabinet meeting on the 30th of July. I wrote to them on the 27th of August. The Councillor Jones is partly right. The letter was misstated. The letter said the 27th of September.
Yes.
But it was sent on the 27th of August, not the 27th of October. That was the misstate on it. And there is as much evidence as you or anybody else will want me to produce that email was sent to all ward councillors who had schemes in their wards this year on the 27th of August. There was ample time for councillors to ask questions and get involved before officers then issued further follow-up invitations for councillors to get involved with.
Thank you.
Yes. Can I answer that? Because I don't dispute that. The email. I want to speak, and I'm not going to be silenced.
There's only one answer you're going to get. You've had the answer.
No, I contacted the Cabinet member in the interim, and I've got an email from the Cabinet Office to say that the Cabinet member would clarify things
We came out on an email on the 3rd of October. So you're incorrect.
Explained it was misstated. Okay, you've had the answer.
Oh, it may be misstated.
When?
No dispute.
Members should be asking questions only.
Councillor Wendy Lewis.
Can I ask the cabinet member? Now we all know that we were sent emails, everybody who is involved. Do we not think the local members should apologise for letting their residents down?
Well, the only thing I can say in response to that, Councillor Lewis, is, and I said this, I made this point very strongly in scrutiny. When members have got involved with either myself directly or with officers dealing with schemes that are being implemented, there has been very little dispute or disagreement as a result of that. I can think of many schemes, and there'll be councillors on the call tonight who will be fully aware, where you've chosen to get involved with officers because you've had issues raised by residents, because a lot of these schemes are potentially cause disquiet within the wards. Okay, I said in scrutiny that a lot of these schemes end up sorry, there's an echo there, end up having to be compromise schemes. And I can think of many where we've planned to put a scheme in and it's affected someone's access. We planned to put a scheme in and it's affected someone's parking bay. We've planned to put schemes in and it's affected trees. All sorts of things have been affected. And by working together and councillors getting in touch with either myself or officers directly, we have generally found satisfactory compromise situations and workarounds for those issues that have been arised. That's actually happening as we speak today in all of the schemes being highlighted here, whether Mayors, Alpha Link, Sketty Links, Alpha and Sketty Links, sorry. We have continued to make amendments where we can. What we can't do, and this is what I said in scrutiny, is compromise the scheme. What we've got here is an attempt by councillors to overturn the due process of this authority. A decision was made by this Cabinet on the 30th of July 2020 to implement these schemes and accept the Welsh Government grant funding. Many councillors, on behest of people within their wards, are trying and wanting to disrupt, stop and delay those schemes. Now, any delays to those schemes leaves them under serious threat because we have still got the target of completing funding, the spending of the funding by the 31st of March. We have not been given any leeway by Welsh Government. The spending criteria is still in place, and there have been attempts in many circles and numbers of residents, not all, I know that not all can be cast with this, but there are many people who are totally against these schemes. And what we can't do as councillors and officers is go against the will of the democratic process of this authority. These schemes have been agreed by Cabinet, where all of you were invited to attend. It was a public meeting. All of you were invited to attend, as well as members of the public. You didn't attend. That's why I sent the letters out. I sent the letters out because none of you came to the Cabinet meeting to hear it for yourselves. And I thought, well, give them a bit of a heads up. Let them know in advance that these have been agreed in their wards. And I was trying to be fair with councillors by letting them know because you weren't at the Cabinet meeting where it was agreed. And as a result of me giving you the heads up, nobody got in touch with me about it, really speaking, and nobody took up that offer to have early involvement in the processes. And the net result has been then that residents have found out about it, not happy about it, and are challenging you about what was your role in all of this. Well, don't blame the authority for your lack of involvement or lack of interest or lack of participation. That's not my fault. As I said, I haven't got time to go around knocking people's doors.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Rob Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. Not a question, but a request of the Cabinet member. I think the Cabinet member has put a very, very full picture in front of members tonight and has outlined exactly the actions he took. And I've seen the emails and I've seen the work that Councillor Thomas has put in to make sure all of the local members were informed and had every opportunity to comment. And as Councillor Thomas said, they did not take that opportunity. But I just thought it might be useful, Chair, to expand on what Councillor Thomas has said this evening, if we were to consider, or would the Cabinet member consider including his communications as part of the response that we can put in the next agenda of Council as a written record, because I think it's important that the public are able to judge for themselves, given what has been said, that the Cabinet member, because I've seen the emails, he definitely did what he said he did, and there was definitely no response.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, Chair, please, what we are trying to do here is to build and develop schemes in very short time. I went through all of this. Councillors know the tight timescales that we're up against with, Welsh Government funding. It wasn't agreed in Cabinet till July, and then we had to have, double quick time to get these schemes implemented. We have, as was highlighted in the budget again tonight by the leader, a further commitment to add to and enhance our cycling and walking infrastructure across Swansea. Thank God that this council took this initiative, this authority in 2017-18, and we've got a record amount of investment. Look how that was valued and used by people during this pandemic. How many of your residents or your local community have cherished and thought the world of the active travel sites and projects that we've implemented throughout and across Swansea? Where would we have been without that? If we'd, messed about and pondered and wondered what best to do. We have taken a proactive stance in actually increasing active travel. I'm not apologising for that. That is a stated aim. That's a manifesto commitment of this, and this as an authority has picked that up through. That's our council pledge as well. So we are carrying out the wishes of this authority by expanding our cycling and walking network across, and will continue to do it. Now, and I encourage councillors now and in the future to keep an eye on what's been agreed at Cabinet and what grant funding is being accepted from Welsh Government, and please take early engagement. I said in scrutiny, it is not in my interest, officers' interest, or any interest of anyone within this authority to build schemes that you and people in your communities don't want. We want the involvement, but what we can't do, as I said, we can make we make whole hosts of changes that we can incorporate within the scheme. What we can't do is scrap the scheme. Once it's been agreed, we can't then scrap it. That's not up for debate. And I know there was things like petitions going about wanting us to scrap the scheme. That, petition wasn't agreed with Democratic Service, nothing to do with me, because the decision had been made by the Cabinet of this council, not by me. It was agreed by Cabinet. And this petition sought to overturn the democratic will of this authority.
Can I ask the Cabinet member if such a report as suggested by the leader goes forward, that we also have a right of reply?
To speak, Mike, you've had one chance. I can't keep calling the same members back all the time, going back and forth over things that have been discussed in scrutiny and in other places. We're not going to get anywhere. You've had the response of the Cabinet member quite clearly, right? The next speaker is Councillor Mary Jones. 1 minute for a supplementary question, Mary, and 3 minutes for a response to the Cabinet member.
Chair, can we move on to the next question, please? Honest to God, you said yourself it's only half hour.
No.
Should we not move on to the next question?
That's why I didn't.
I haven't spoken yet. That's totally unfair. In fact, the question I was going to ask was similar to Councillor Mike Day, but just to point out, I wasn't actually in scrutiny. And what I was going to say, Councillor Thomas has repeatedly said that all members that had schemes in their wards were contacted in August or September. Actually, I was not talking about a Toucan crossing. I was not contacted, and it was the scheme that went across the front of the student village, which is plainly in my ward. So not all councillors were contacted, and if it hadn't been for Jeff being my husband, I wouldn't have known anything about any scheme that affected my ward. So my question is the same as Mike's. Will we have the right to put in what we sent back to Councillor Thomas if we feel that it's missing when you come to do the question or report in the next meeting where there are questions.
Already asked and answered, Chair. Already asked and answered.
Could I can answer that if you allow, Chair.
Briefly.
As I stated, I'll be very brief. All the projects for this year were approved at Cabinet on the 30th of July. If you look at the agenda for Cabinet 30th of July and the subsequent minutes, Councillor Mary Jones's ward wasn't included. The scheme was not meant to have been. There was an oversight with the border because it's right on the boundary, and Councillor Mary Jones's ward was not included in the scheme definition. That's why she was not written a letter. Now then, subsequently,
point of information, the original map shows a built-up thing across the Student Village access road, which is clearly in my ward.
Point of order, Chair. This is a question and answers. They may not like the answers, but they get an answer. It's not going back and forth.
It's not
Please stick to outstanding orders. You know, they haven't.
I subsequently apologised to Councillor Mary Jones for an oversight, whether it was on my part or part of officers. It was a genuine oversight. It was not a deliberate attempt to leave anybody out, quite the opposite. My intention of my communication was to incorporate all councillors that I knew of or were aware of that had schemes in their wards. It was a simple oversight. There was no benefit or gain for me or officers or the authority to leave out a councillor. There was nothing to gain from that action. It was just a genuine oversight for which I have subsequently apologised to Councillor Mary Jones for.
Thank you, Cabinet Member. And sorry, I lost my connection. I didn't hear it all.
Engaged all last year with the officers. So I've been engaged the whole time. That's all I want to say. I've been engaged for a year with this. So it's...
Thank you. Right now, you're all muted. Right. If you read your standing orders, right, you're allowed to ask a supplementary question, and the Cabinet Member is allowed 3 minutes to respond. It then goes on to say there shall be no debate on the answer given, right? And that's exactly what the trap you've fallen into tonight. You're debating the response of the Cabinet Member. Right, you've had the question, you've made the supplementary questions, the Cabinet Member has responded. We would now move on to the next question. Question 3, Councillor Bridget Rowlands. Do you have any supplementaries?
Thank you, Presiding Member, and thank you to the Cabinet Member for the response. Firstly, I'd like to thank all of the staff that deal with fly tipping. It must it is one of the most horrendous jobs that a council have to deal with, because it is pretty disgusting what I see in my ward, and I'm sure it's in everyone else's ward as well. What does concern me, and I believe that there's also another question in about this as well. I asked about enforcement of this, and it says that there's only 4 fixed penalty notices, because we've gone from prosecutions to fixed penalty notices. A brief explanation on that would be appreciated, and my apologies if I've missed where that's been conveyed to us. And I can see from one of the other questions that has been asked tonight, I think it's in question 8. Sorry, no, it's not. It's question 9. There seems to be a huge lack of enforcement or fixed penalty notices issued. So I'd like to ask how the fixed penalty notices are issued, because I know I've given, since March 2020, a lot more than 4 names and addresses to the enforcement team regarding fly tipping that I've personally found, and I'm sure this is I'm sure other ward members have got given similar information. This is a cost to the authority. I think we've got in here 150k per year as a cost to the authority, but I'm sure the cost is probably more than that when you look at officer time and all of the, you know, the disposal of it. I know I've had asbestos many times in my ward, which is expensive to get rid of. So
question.
yes, well, I think I've asked a few questions.
Okay, 1 minute you're allowed for a question.
So I'm out of time, am I?
Yeah. Well, if you sum up very quickly.
Well, I'd just like to ask, please, could we look at how are the fixed penalty notices applied, along with all the other questions that I've asked during the minute?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mark Thomas.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the. Yeah, it is a difficult one. Look, and this is something that's close to all our hearts. The biggest issue is burden of proof, isn't it? Finding something that we can use to actually carry out the prosecution. And by the way, the fixed penalty notice are not instead of, court proceedings. We use them where they are minor offences. Okay, so if somebody has dumped, I think the example I gave when we introduced this. Well, if somebody had dumped a black bag somewhere, we would normally, as a first offence, treat that as a fixed penalty notice. It's if somebody tips a trailer load of stuff somewhere, then that is something that we'd be looking to prosecute through the courts. As I said, it does have to follow a legal process. It's like any other sort of enforcement we take. I'm not the expert in this. I mean, I can certainly get more detail for you, Councillor Rowlands, but, our officers are out there and our officers want to prosecute. So all I can tell you is, yeah, it is a low number. Catching people is difficult, and not, as you appreciate. People are getting smarter. They're leaving less evidence about. And we do search for evidence. When we go to a fly tipping spot, all of our officers are fully aware. They search through that to see if they can find identification of who's tipped it there or where it's come from. But we can only follow that up in form of prosecution then when there's enough evidence to support that. So I can't comment on sort of individual cases why they didn't succeed and lead to prosecution, other than to say it's a bit like car parking fines and offences like that. There is a laid down legal process that officers have to follow, and that will or won't lead to prosecution. It's not something I'm actively involved in, other than it being a legal process. So yeah, it does seem a small number, but I would imagine that those are the only ones we've successfully been able to prosecute. But I can get you more detail, which I can follow up with, about the actual process and what is required, and that might be helpful for all councillors possibly, and I can furnish you that with that information.
I would sincerely appreciate that, and also I think a bit of clarification on whether we're doing fixed penalty notices or prosecutions, because it says in here the council introduced a new option in the answer that you've given me.
No, it is if I can, Chair, it is an option, but it's not the only method of prosecution. That's what I'm saying. Okay. We do fixed penalty notice for smaller offences, if that's the right way to describe it, and then prosecution for bigger or repeat offences.
Sorry, it's the way I've read it then. Okay, that's fine.
For Councillor McDay, a supplementary on the question asked, not a revisit of the previous active travel. Okay, Mike?
I was planning to do that, Chair, yeah. Can I ask the Cabinet Member to confirm that the biodiversity champion for the Council wasn't involved in any discussions about the schemes?
Not directly as a biodiversity champion. That is, as part of, we haven't invited him in specifically because of his role. Like anybody else, he would be treated like any other councillor. If there's a scheme in his ward, he would get an invitation as a ward councillor. But we don't have a process whereby all of our developments is that where we, members of the team that the biodiversity champion works with are actively involved in all of the scheme, because they obviously impact on biodiversity, tree planting, or in some cases tree felling. But no, we don't directly invite or involve the biodiversity champion in these schemes.
Thank you. Question 5, Councillor Susan Jones, any supplementary?
Thank you, Presiding Officer. No, there's no supplementaries for me. Thank you very much to the Cabinet for answering that question.
Not from any of the other members. Councillor Peter May, are you asking this in question 5? Got your hand up?
Yeah, sorry, Presiding Member. It was for question 3. It's an extremely short question, if I could have indulgence.
We're not going back, sorry, and that's the third.
Well, I had the hand up at the time when it was taken and was overlooked. It's so brief.
The agenda. Thank you all for your attendance.
There you go. Dear, oh dear.
Dear, oh dear. Yeah. Have a good evening, everyone.